Hello again, and welcome to the Master's Voice. I am Celestial, and you are welcome to this channel. To old and new subscribers alike, you are very welcome. The Master's Voice is an audio and a visual resource that you can find on multiple social media platforms. This is the main blog, and there is a matching blog like it that is called Canal Profético La Voz del Señor. That is being translated into Spanish, and the address for it is usually underneath the video. If you don't find any information about the channel underneath the video that you're watching, it simply means that I haven't had time to update it, so you might need to scroll back quite a few videos because I tend to put them out as fast as I can so that I can make my way through the library that the Lord has given me. The prophecy for today is called Vindication, and it centers around various prophecies. These are just little snippets. If you're new to the Master's Voice prophecy blog, so you may not understand, usually every video has one topic or sometimes multiple topics that are given by the Lord on the same day, and it is one prophecy. However, occasionally the Lord will say something to me here and there. It's a prophetic word, but it's usually sometimes just a few sentences. Sometimes it's just one sentence. And that is not something that I have been in the habit of putting on the blog. Usually I will put full prophecies on the blog, but when I get these little snippets, I tend to keep them in my archives. And then when they build up, I will usually present them all together because now they have the same weight as one prophetic word. The one that I'm going to give today has 3 different dates: November the 7th, November the 1st, and October the 18th, all of those within the year of 2024. But the word vindication will be centering around one particular figure that the Lord has mentioned here on the Master's Voice Prophecy blog before. And so if you're new, you can benefit from using the playlist. Playlist is usually where the prophecies are all grouped by theme. So they're grouped by theme or they're grouped by one particular topic. And then they will all be in a line from the oldest to the newest. And if you're new, a playlist might be the very best way for you to find out what the Master's Voice Prophecy blog is about. You work your way through a theme or you work your way through one topic. And by the time you go through all the videos, or at least half the videos in that playlist, you will have a much greater sense of what is on God's mind concerning that topic or the general theme, which might have different topics in it. And then it will help you to be able to better navigate the blog. The reason that this resource is here is so that people can understand that Jesus Christ is on a decidedly different wavelength from the majority of us. The Lord is not happy with humanity. The Lord is not happy with the United States in particular. And therefore, this entire library of prophetic words that God has been giving me over the last 11 to 12 years is to let the people of the United States know that they are under a judgment from God because of the sins that they have committed, and that the Lord is going to judge those sins and put sentencing on them. And then certain things are going to happen here in the nation of the United States. They've already started happening, and therefore it is necessary for the people to understand God's posture. The reason I'm here is not for people to think about, well, why does this continue? This is going to continue until I finish with all the prophetic words that God's giving me. That means the one that he gives me in the moment, recent ones, as well as the ones that have been written down for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. I'm going to have to work through all those prophecies, and they will continue to come until the very last one is done, because the Lord said to me, do not leave any of the messages undone. Make sure that you do and make a video for all of them. And so today's message, I'm going to date it from the oldest date. So the oldest date that I will give here is October the 18th, 2024, and the title of the message is Vindication. Vindication, to define that word before I go to the banner scriptures, vindication is a word that we use to define a situation where information has been given, a certain mindset has been put forward, and it is not believed. It is not believed. It is met with mockery. It is met with unbelief. It is met with skepticism. It is met with so many litmus tests that eventually on the face of it, apparently, the information does not seem to be trustworthy. It does not seem to be real. It meets with so many barriers as it's trying to come out that sometimes the information tends to look like it has fallen away. So what that means is that information will come from a source that is presenting true information, but because of the resistance that the information meets, it appears to be defeated by an obstacle, by a wall that is in its way, and it seems to fall away. However, the passage of time always reveals what is vindicated. So all that is needed for a word that is initially stopped, or a mindset or a position that is initially resisted and pushed back against and torn down. Apparently, it seems to be torn down. It seems to be refuted. It seems to be knocked down and put back in its place. It seems to be made harmless. All that is needed for a vindicated word to be proven is the passage of time. So vindication is basically the final bus stop when information that was defeated, that was fought against, seems to almost resurrect as it comes into its moment. And then everything that was said in the earlier period now fulfills. It now begins to become larger than life. It now is seen to be absolutely true as it begins to come into its moment. And then those who fought against it, those who spoke against it, those who tried to tear it down, those who thought that they had killed the information, basically causing it to fall to the ground, usually watch in shock and dismay as everything that they claimed was a lie actually is proven to have been true all along. So once you hear that process explained, then you automatically do not need to be told that if that information contained important details that could have saved or could have protected or could have shielded the very people who were tearing it down and refuting it and mocking it and destroying it, then once the information resurrects and begins to unfold and sometimes unleash, depending on what kind of information it is, the people who should have been listening, the people who should have been benefiting from it, the people who should have been taking it into consideration and listening to it are very often distraught. They are dismayed. They are disappointed. They are hurt because the information that could have saved them was rejected in favor of a different mindset, in favor of something that was not true at all. And so this message is concerning one particular servant of God, but we will get there. God brought this man up conversationally and mentioned a few things about him. And when you actually take the time to go back behind this servant of God and check the things that he said, he is long dead now, but if you take the time to go back and check the things that he said, you will actually see that this man had indeed been granted what the Lord called the lens of God, meaning that he had, for a moment in time, been favored by God to look through God's prophetic eye at a future time that was coming. But because prophecy says that it will be fulfilled at the Lord's time, because prophecy comes by the will of God. So this man passed on and did not get to see the fullness of what he prophesied take place. But now we are standing here in the earth, able to look back to what he said, and we can now see that many things that he spoke of have happened already. And as the Lord said of him, there is only very little of what he said remaining to be fulfilled. So Vindication, October 18, 2024. The banner scriptures for this are quite a few, and they all come from the book of Revelation 18. Revelation 18 is the book out of which the United States will be judged. Not the book, but the chapter. The book of Revelation contains judgments that will come to many nations. But when it comes to Revelation 18 is the absolute chapter where America's judgment will be taken from. That chapter is 100% talking about the United States of America. Just a moment, please. The first verse is Revelation chapter 18 and verse 9. The kings of the earth who committed fornication and lived luxuriously with her will weep and lament for her when they see the smoke of her burning, standing at a distance for fear of her torment. This is verse 10, saying, Alas, alas, that great city Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour your judgment has come. And the second scripture is Revelation 18 and verse 19. They threw dust on their heads and cried out, weeping and wailing, Alas, alas, that great city, in which all who had ships on the sea became rich by her wealth, for in 1 hour she is made desolate. And so now let me go to the beginning, and I will be just looking at one sentence that the Lord gave me, just a one sentence. That's all he said on November the 7th, 2024. And he said, You have hardened your hearts against me, and you have stiffened your necks and will not bow. You have hardened your hearts against me, and you have stiffened your necks and will not bow. And this was just an observation that the Lord was making, because I make prophecies every single week. I bring out the prophetic words. That's why it's so important to listen to the date on the prophecy, because a lot of people seem to think that we don't hear God every day, which is very preposterous. You're a human being. You have a birth date, and you definitely have a death date that is coming up in the future. But every single day you speak. Every single day you have thoughts. Every single day you have opinions. You have feelings. You have emotions. You give your observations on a million different things. You put the TV on and you have an opinion about everything that you see. But then for some reason, us, the lesser creation, not all of us, but too many of us, for comfort, the lesser creation thinks that God, the greater creation, is sitting up in heaven and he has a gag order on his mouth. He can't speak. He can't express himself. He has nothing to say. People assume that God has no one that he talks to. He just sits in heaven and talks to the angels and Jesus and the Holy Spirit, and he does not engage with man. And nowhere is that actually supported. When you read books like Genesis, when you read books like the Exodus and Deuteronomy, people think that the only time God spoke to Abraham and Moses is when they actually wrote something down. Absolutely not. These men's writings, if you read them carefully, they give clear indications that these were men that were very, very close to God. You might consider everything that is written down about Abraham that Moses wrote. You might consider everything that Moses wrote about his own experiences only as just, let's just call it corporate boilerplate. The things that Moses was writing down in Leviticus, the things that he was writing down in Deuteronomy and Numbers, things like that, all those laws, all those rules, all those regulations, just call that corporate boilerplate. Those were the things that Moses captured from God to last as an eternity for laws and keeping and teaching to the people that Moses was leading at that time, as well as for us to learn from, for instruction, for reproof, for reprimand, to give us an understanding of who God is and what his commandments are like, and that they are holy and meant to keep men sober and walking in righteous holiness before the Lord. But nowhere does it indicate that because that was all Moses wrote, that was all Moses heard. Moses was a friend of God. The Bible says, for instance, that Moses went up to the top of the mountain and sat before God for 40 days on a fast. He sat there for 40 days on a fast, and all he came back with was 10 laws on a piece of paper. Do you think that that was all God was telling Moses? That God took a month and a half to keep a man up there. The man did not eat, the Bible says. The man did not drink, but he was up there for 40 days, and he basically came down with 10 sentences. And do we apply our minds and think that Moses was just up there sitting before God and the two of them were just silent, and then God would give him like one word per day until he finally got the 10 commandments? No, Moses was with the Father up there communing about very deep things. God's presence alone was infusing Moses with a kind of life that was far greater than what normal people expect. So imagine Moses is coming down from that kind of communion, that kind of friendship with God, that kind of in-depth interrelationship where a mere human being is actually able to sit before the living God, accessing that kind of information. And then he comes down to the disappointment of a striptease dance party around a golden calf. How do you want Moses to reconcile the fact that he has observed and witnessed and spent time with the living God and comes down looking like a human star, glowing like a human night light, only to come down and see people saying that a hunk of gold that they have fashioned in the fire, this is our God. This is the God that led us out of Egypt. No wonder Moses was furious. He was unable to contain the rage and the disappointment and the anger that he felt, that he had just come from a supernatural experience of 40 days worth to find those people doing that. God said of Moses, and he said that if I am the one who raises up a prophet in your midst, I will speak to that one like a friend. God sees his prophets as friends. And how many of you have friends and you are silent towards them and you speak to them only once a month or once every 3 months? Why do people have this kind of thinking about such an important function in the Bible that God has actually established to make sure that we don't walk in darkness, to make sure that we don't walk in error, to make sure that we are not missing our times and our seasons, because it gets dangerous for us as humanity when we miss our times and our seasons. The times and the seasons that we are in, if we miss them, it's not just about, oh, God was prophesying prosperity and you missed it. Oh, God was prophesying a new marriage, a new car, and you missed it. God is prophesying about plagues, pandemics. He's prophesying about wars and rumors of wars. He's prophesying about mass death. He's prophesying about invasions. He's prophesying about bombs falling on cities, fires blowing up. How dare anybody at this time think that God speaking about such important things, such important events that are loading in accordance with Mark 13, Luke 21, Matthew 24, Revelation chapter 6, the entire book of Revelation. How dare anyone think that these things are gloomy and doomy topics that God is simply bringing to depress them and stop them from having an endless conga line of parties and events and places that they want to go and try whatever it is that they want to go and try. How dare we miss these important times and seasons? And when God is bringing these times and seasons into the earth to warn us, then people are claiming, oh, it's all doom and gloom prophecy. This is the same nonsense that America has done decade after decade. And God has brought out a servant who is at least 5 or 6 decades removed from myself, who went through the same thing, being called all kinds of ridiculous names while he was speaking things that now that we are here in 2024, the man is being vindicated by God. The man is being vindicated by the proof of the things that he said happening in our world around us. Now that it's happening, people call it grappling with social change. They no longer call it doom and gloom. It was the people of his generation that called it doom and gloom. The same way the people of my generation call these messages doom and gloom. And then later, when they are in slave camps in the country run by their own government, only to be carried to slave camps run by Russians, then they will be calling it woe. They will be calling it lamentation and distress. They will forget that they were warned about it and they sat and used their mouth and called it doom and gloom and depression and darkness and hatefulness of Celestial. This is the cyclical madness that America produces. And then when her calamity falls upon her in a single day, like Revelation says, in a single hour, she will automatically flip and become the hypocrite that she is and say, but what have we done to deserve these things? And where can God send us a man now to tell us the truth? And what shall we do? Where is the man of God? Where is the woman of God to lead us through the times? Complete amnesia of the things that she's saying and doing right now. God says, you have hardened your hearts against me and you have stiffened your necks and you will not bow. And God was basically bringing this up because as I've been bringing the prophecy every day, 2 prophecies, sometimes when I have time, 3 prophecies. If there's not enough time, some days go by and I can only manage one like today. Then the people will say, do you have prophecy every day? This is why I'm suspicious. God talks to you more than he talked to Amos. God talks to you more than he talked to Jeremiah or Ezekiel or whoever or Moses. Meanwhile, God is keeping an open line of communication to let those who care to know that because of the hardness of heart of the American people and because of the stiffness of their neck, hardness of heart means that when the word is coming, the American people have a shield over their heart. There's actually a prophecy that I made, I think some months ago this year, where I said that God showed me that there is an iron shield over the hearts of the people. And that shield is the shield of the God of logic that Americans follow. Like, this doesn't make logical sense. It's not logical for one person to have this many prophecies. That's why I'm suspicious. somewhere in there, the prophecy is coming from Lucifer. The things that people say, if you say that the prophecies are coming from Lucifer, when Lucifer gets ready to punish you, don't complain. When Lucifer starts doing everything that he said that he's going to do to you, according to what you say the prophecy comes from, make sure that you engage with Lucifer concerning what he's saying. But what God says is that the American people have a hardened heart. Their hearts are so hard that they cannot hear. It is a mixture of, because they think that everything has to be apprehended by logic, even though their logic is from its foundation twisted. Why is the logic twisted? Because it is rooted in lies, because it is rooted in pride, because it is rooted in humanistic doctrine, where the American will always lift up emotion and feelings over biblical truth. Once biblical truth is rejected, all logic that is resting on humanistic doctrine and emotions and let's have compassion for this, even though the thing that we want to have compassion for is sin according to the Bible, then it will always be warped, and everything that grows up out of it, all the thinking, all the way that the society is structured, it is rooted in lies. And so only lying doctrines can grow out of lying roots. That is one aspect of it. The other aspect is nothing but pride. America is the home of pride. The Bible says in the book of Job, I think it is chapter 41, it's describing a very large creature that God has made, Leviathan, and God made Leviathan. Leviathan is not one of the hybrids that the devil made or anything. And God is the one talking to Job and saying to Job that Leviathan is a creature of great pride. And God knows why Leviathan is proud. Leviathan is proud because he is so massive, he's so big, he's so strong, he's such a huge creature. The Bible says that when Leviathan actually stirs up the sea, he leaves a shining wake. Wake means that foamy water that comes after a very high-powered speedboat has gone past, the way the ocean is churned up. God says that the size of Leviathan, he's telling Job that Leviathan's size is so great that when the Leviathan does a move in the water, the whole sea becomes choppy and stirred up. That's one thing. Another thing is because of Leviathan's strength. So it's not just his size that makes a vast bathtub like the ocean stirred up when he moves by. Leviathan causes a stir when he moves, but Leviathan is also extremely strong. This creature is the very creature that can coil around ships, that can actually just smack even a submarine and splinter the thing. Leviathan is known for his strength, but then he's also seen as impenetrable. God says that the way he laid the scales of Leviathan is that they are seamlessly molded one to another, meaning that Leviathan can be in that water and yet not get wet because his scales are so seamlessly flat together. But not only that, they are pierce proof, iron proof, and whatever. And only God can pierce the hide of Leviathan. And it says this tellingly of him. He's proud in his size, he's proud in his strength, and he's proud in his invulnerability. His armor has no chinks in it. And God says that Leviathan is king over all the children of pride. That spirit, which is also a real creature, is what rules over all those who are exalted in their minds and their hearts. Leviathan is a powerful principality in the United States. The people of the United States are some of the proudest people that have ever lived throughout history. As proud as any jungle tribe in the Amazon that has never taken a loss in a fight. As proud as the Greeks at the height of their power. As proud as the Romans and the Babylonians at the height of their civilizations, when they would just march to victory after victory in war after war, domination after domination, conquest after conquest, making powerful kings bow before them and pay tribute taking all the beautiful women to be their captives. After a while, when you only know victory and you go from victory to victory, when you're winning all the gold medals, when you're winning all the accolades, when you're the one who enters the room and everyone wants to rush and shake your hand and say, oh yes, we're so glad that you came, and what is your opinion on this public policy question, and what is your opinion on this question before the United Nations? Lead us, oh leader. After a while, you become drunk on the stench of yourself. You begin to buy your own hype, you begin to buy your own propaganda, and you become insufferable. And then you know what else happens? Complacency. Even when the same people who used to court you, the same people who used to pursue you, the same people who used to have a rose-colored glasses outlook towards you, when they now fall out of you and they can't stand you and they begin to murmur and then they begin to talk and then they begin to shout against you, you remain so proud that if you can't get their buy-in on your propaganda, guess what America does? We write our own propaganda here at home. Since no one will call us the greatest anymore, we continue to stipulate within these borders and put them on the loudspeakers towards the international community. We are the greatest. We are still the greatest. It doesn't matter if you're mad, and it doesn't matter if you all go for a sleepover at Vladimir Putin's gold mansion at the Kremlin. We will still be the greatest, and that's because we write the narrative, we set the tone, and we say so. That is the general exports of the nation. But within the nation, every nation is made up of people. The people of this nation are not humble. The people of this nation have not known the kind of suffering and sorrowing that they have caused other people. And God said that their hearts are very hard and their necks are stiff. When you talk of a stiff neck, it is very different from the kind of pride that I'm describing, where you have pride in the fact that you have military might. You have pride in the fact that you're a world leader, that you're a world innovator. You have invented this and invented that, and everybody wants your products. You have pride in the fact that you have so much going for you within your own borders. That is the pride that comes from naturally building up over time a reputation, and also putting accomplishment, putting points on the board, putting trophies in your case. But then the stiff neck speaks of a kind of person who is now entering a humbling phase, or has been humbled and still wants to remain as proud as they were when they were free. So God is now starting to send natural disasters judgments. God is now starting to send economic judgments. The government may be lying for all it's worth, but every American can tell from the state of their flatter and flatter pocketbook that we are not in any times of prosperity. We are in times when disposable income is becoming increasingly lean, where every wage earner is feeling the pinch, where there's less on the table, less to go around, less to share. The spirit of competition is high for the few available resources that we have. And no matter what lies the government lies, every person knows that struggle times are here and struggler times are coming. And with all the things that God is starting to do, these are just the opening notes of America's judgment. The people's necks remain hard. They continue to say that the messages that the Lord is sending now, which will be their reality later, are lies. They continue to mock prophetic servants of God. They continue to say, oh no, another doom and gloom prophecy, something that will be the reality later. Hard heart, Leviathan spirit, stiff neck, at a time when you should be bowing, at a time when you should be saying, Lord, teach us. Lord, lead us. Lord, we hear your word. Lord, what should we do? The people absolutely, like a baby that has had enough of the green beans puree, slap the message off the table and say, next. They just conversationally say, false prophet, and they walk off, unaware that the video they're walking off is speaking of something that is going to come to their lives, to their doors. And so that is the message, that one sentence. Always bear in mind that God can give you one sentence, and when you actually sit and honor that sentence, as I do, when you sit and honor that sentence and pay attention to the Lord's cadence, when you look at what God is saying and you pay attention to why is God speaking like this, and why is he saying this, and why is he saying this, you can get such a deep Bible study out of just one thing that God will say. And so none of his words are light. All of God's words are weighted, and they are never to be taken lightly. But America does not esteem God, does not believe that God speaks. And the servant of God that I will speak about in this prophecy endured the same thing. In fact, he lived in a time where people were staunchly skeptical of prophecy. And they only believed in the pastoral, evangelical, this is evangelizing, and also the teaching function. They did not believe largely in any kind of apostolic or prophetic move. They used to vet it so hard, and according to them, because the prophecy was not for their day. The prophecy was to warn them so that they would pray against the day that the prophecy would come into its vindication. But they misjudged the time because they had hard hearts and stiff necks. And so they examined this man's prophecy to death. And if you look on the internet now concerning this man, you will find so many blog pieces, and all of them conclude at the bottom: he failed. He failed as a prophet. He was a wonderful pastor, they said, but his prophecies largely failed. So their words actually are living on to this day. This man is no more with us. Their words are living on to this day as their estimation of this man's word, not knowing that his words are now strengthening themselves, and many of them have already come to pass. Many of the things he said have already become fulfilled, and God said there remains only a small portion. And unfortunately, the small portion of what this man spoke about, this is the portion that contains phrases like millions will die. America has wasted the time when she should have heard the words and prayed against such a phrase. Millions will die. And now she is facing someone who, now I'm speaking of myself, in these days uses that phrase quite freely. Millions will die. God says millions will die. And people are still saying that millions will not die, but millions will flourish and do well in the United States. But since there's 341 million of us for those prophetic words to be tested on, I guess we will just have to see if it is the word of God that will fail or the millions that will fail. So that is the November 7, 2024 message from the Lord. You have hardened your hearts against me, and you have stiffened your necks and will not bow. Please notice that when God says against me, that means that you are not hardening your hearts against Celestial. You are not hardening your hearts against me at all, because nothing I say to you is of myself. Everything that I say is dated. Everything that I say is titled. Everything that I say is written down. And it is all coming from the Lord. So when you are rejecting the messages here, the Lord says you are rejecting him. So the next message, I'm going from the most recent, and now the second one is from November the 1st, 2024. And out of nowhere in the middle of the day, as I was going about my tasks, the Lord just started talking about the fact that America is going to war. But he chose a very interesting angle. He wasn't talking about, and then the war will come and the war will be brutal and the war will be like this. He was basically telling me that Americans are going to be having their showers in barracks, Celestial. And I just thought, Lord, how do we just start there of the sentence? Just nowhere. Let me read it for you. Americans will be washing up from barracks in the future. Washing up from military encampments, military structures, military dormitories, eating and sleeping in army barracks as they prepare for war. Young men and even young women will be conscripted by force, made to join the army. They will not back out of serving as they expect or as they say they will now. The truth is they will not have any choice, and the matter will not be up for discussion. They will be made to join by a convergence of factors that will be revealed at a later time. And this is not the first time God is saying it. He even said it in the October 3rd prophecy that is called force conscriptions. He said to me that Americans will be forced to join the army for a range of reasons that will be revealed at a future time, meaning he hasn't told me all of them. In that prophecy, the only one he mentioned is that he said that the government has student loans over people, and the student loans will be called in. And if you can't pay all your student loan, you will be forced to join the army, or there will be penalties. So this convergence of factors, that means that there's many different ways that the government is going to one-up people, but he did not give me all of them. So far, all I know is student loans. They will be made to join by a convergence of factors that will be revealed at a later time. When things become rough in America and the government is the only one doing well and the only way out, people will join the army to get the benefits of food and shelter being offered there, as opposed to living on the streets and enduring harsh economic circumstances. Army life is going to be seen as much more tolerable to civilian life, so it will be easy to see why some will sign up. And so right here, God has in fact just revealed a second reason that people will not want to starve. People will not want to be homeless. People will not want to be battling the economic downturn that is absolutely coming. America is going to have a terrifying wage crisis. America is going to have a terrifying credit crunch. I still am not really sure what a credit crunch is. It might just be that they don't give people credit anymore and that you have to buy whatever it is you need by cash. So credit cards and that kind of lifestyle of buy now, pay in installments, buy now, pay later, buy now, payment date comes, you still can't pay, defer, defer, defer. Maybe that's what a credit crunch is. But either way, excuse me, please. There's going to be a harsh economic crisis coming to the United States, and a lot of people are just not going to be able to make daily life work. So previously I've spoken of homelessness. Previously I've spoken of banks repossessing homes. Homes are going to be repossessed even if you've paid 99.9% of the house. If you have not finished the payment, the bank is going to repo the entire house. That kind of thing. And I saw people losing their homes. I said that there's a homelessness epidemic coming. I've been speaking about that since 2020, that people will have to go back to live with their exes, have to live with their family members. They will have to give up their bigger houses and live in a very small, cramped 2-bedroom, yet is a 7-person family with only 1 bathroom in there. And families are going to be under pressure and things like that. But what God was saying here, this particular aspect, is that the war of America is a given. The war of America is a given. A lot of people don't understand that a nation that goes around starting wars in other countries, a nation that goes around instigating political unrest in other countries, is a nation that literally, whether the people of the nation consciously have the understanding of it in their mind or not, you don't need to have an understanding of things for God to judge you. You cannot say, God, I was ignorant of this, therefore you can't judge me. No, if you get behind the wheel of a car and you know you don't know how to drive a car and you just start weaving it about and you plow through a bunch of people and you cause death, you cause harm, you cause loss, you cannot, when you are taken to trial, stand there crying, feeling sorry for yourself and then saying, but I don't have a license and I'm a poor driver. That will exacerbate your sentence. That will make your sentence worse, because then you know you are not a qualified operator of a motor vehicle. Why did you get behind the wheel of a car? Did you not reasonably foresee that you would cause loss, that you would cause harm, that you would cause death? If you don't know how to do something, why would you set out so confidently to do it? So if the people of a nation don't have the understanding, the moral understanding, but even more so the spiritual understanding of what I'm going to say next, that is neither here nor there. They will still be judged for it as a collective. And the understanding is this. When you look in the Bible, war is something that God was behind. Israel never got up to go and just fight people on a whim. They didn't just get up to go fight people on a whim. Israel fought the designated peoples that God pointed out and said, these are my enemies. And it's not often that you see people in the Bible actually coming up to God and saying, Lord, can you give me a history lesson on why these people are your enemies? Because I just feel some type of way constantly being sent to fight people and being told, only take the sheep and the cattle alive, kill every man, kill every woman, kill every child. These people carried out God's directives to a T. They obeyed him when it came to the matter of war, especially because they were a smaller group of people, and disobedience, tolerating your enemies, as you can see when they crossed into the promised land, it always led to the multiplication of the enemies after a few years. It's like cockroaches. If you don't wipe them all out, after a while, they will multiply and come back even worse than when you first sprayed them. And the second generation of cockroaches that come will be resistant to the spray that you used. which means that you will be forced to escalate and use something different. And so because you don't want to have to escalate and go to extra costs, it is always better to do it at the ground level and to do it well. And Israel, for the most part, were excellent at following God's instructions in war. So you see God active in war, God starting wars against his enemies, who most of them were inbred giant gene carrying people groups, and he did not want them, especially so close to Israel, with their beautiful half Nephilim daughters, enticing the people to intermarry with them, to make treaties with them, to trade with them. God hated that kind of thing. And so he would say, you're going to take their land, but completely wipe them out. However, in the earth, without God pushing America, America has caused untold harm and devastation through the means of war. America has made many an Iraqi womb barren, many a Afghanistan mother cry, many a Syrian father cry. America has caused tears to flow internationally. She has caused despair. She has triggered countless food crises, refugee crises, humanitarian crises around the world. Behind all this huge net of human suffering, if you are able to draw the curtain aside, you will constantly find this country causing, doing, executing, or instigating, or all four at the same time. And so a nation usurping this position, which is God is the one who drives war. And then to the one that war comes to, it is a punishment from the Lord. So you're a Philistine and Israel is coming against you. God is the one who has sent them with a mandate to fight and destroy you. And then you, the Philistine, are getting destroyed because of the iniquity in your midst, because of the iniquity in your roots, and because of your practices like abortion, like temple prostitutes, like human sacrifice, things like that, ferociousness, unkindness, lack of hospitality, all kinds of things. That is why the war is coming against you. So the war is a punishment, a war is indictment. God driven upon an instigator, upon a punisher. But then God will not drive America to go to Iraq and do what she did there, to bomb those people into oblivion, to cause problems in Lebanon, to cause so much economic warfare in nations like Iraq and Cuba and Zimbabwe and so many other nations that America just puts under sanctions and then literally forgets. You press the sanction button and then forget and walk away. And so this nation now usurps the position of God in the earth. And so God cannot overlook this. Americans wish that God can overlook this, but God cannot be just and overlook wickedness and sin. And so that is that. And God was just saying that, conversationally, he comes from so many different angles. He's just saying, Americans will be having their baths in barracks. This is literally the first sentence. Americans will be washing up in barracks. Washing up is doing the dishes. Washing up is maybe swabbing the decks of the Navy ships. Washing up is definitely having the shower, cleaning up. Washing up is taking all your dirty camouflage uniforms, your camo to the group laundry place and sitting there and washing it, watching it go around and around while you whatever. And then people who are in active combat don't even get that. So he's talking about the preparatory phase. He's talking about the fact that Celestial tell them that in the future, the most unlikely people, male and female, young, too young, under the age of 18, Americans are going to be conscripted forcibly into the army under the age of 18. Men and women, young children, they are children actually, when they're under 18, they're going to receive forcible conscription letters to go and serve in the army. And the prophecy is called force conscription from October the 3rd, 2024. So below age and also well over the age of when a person should retire. When a person says, okay, I've done this many tours in the army, I want to get out now. I've done this many tours in the Navy, I want to get out now. Then God is saying you will still see people who should have long retired operating in the army. And he basically just says they're going to be washing up from there. They're going to be in military encampments, military structures, military camps and places like that. And they're going to be doing all their eating and sleeping on base. So just think of a huge chunk of the civilian population that right now, he says, they claim they will not go. This is definitely, for instance, millennials and Gen Z swearing up and down on all social media. It doesn't matter what the government says. They can miss me with that. I'm going to get pregnant and avoid it. Oh no, I'm going to move out of the country. I'm not fighting a rich man's war. I'm not fighting America's wars. Those are the mistakes of the past generations. The Lord says they will force you to join the army, either if you have an outstanding student loan. And also, he says, because when America starts suffering her judgments, when America starts going through economic downturn, economic meltdown, the collapse of currency that I've spoken about, the fall of the dollar that I've spoken about, and so many other things, currency crash, credit crunch, homelessness epidemic, when basically there's a squeeze on the country and people don't even know where their next meal is coming from. That's when you will see people willingly flooding into the government, because he says the government's going to be the only one with resources. The reason the government will be the only one with resources is because they're going to take them from us forcibly. The government is going to take everything. All you need to do is, there's one prophecy that if you watch that prophecy, you will understand what being stripped of wealth is like, because the Lord described it in such detail, and it is called the nascent rise of coin. The nascent rise of coin. The government is going to take everything from people. I just even covered it in a prophecy that I did just 2 days ago. Just a moment. It's called The Regime Will Consume the Republic. The regime will consume the republic, where the Lord was saying that they will take away all the property. They're going to basically take away the property, take away the land. They're going to commandeer businesses. You have your business. Maybe you make fashion. They will commandeer the business, and they will tell you that fashion is a waste of time. And we actually need you to produce this type of fabric and make school uniforms for the children. And they turn you into a state-owned factory where you make school uniforms, and you will not give access to your dream of being a designer and everything. You will make school uniforms, or you'll make maids uniforms, or, as you can hear, you'll be making army uniforms because of the influx of people that will be forced into service. So they're going to take everything, and that prophecy, the nascent rise of coin, really captures what the process will be like, and how the government will make its excuses and say, oh no, this is for friends of the government. This is state-owned property. They will take everything. I saw them taking cufflinks. You know that cufflinks are as personal as it gets. You buy your cufflinks, and then you have your initials put on them. Well, the state is going to take those things and find a man whose initials match it, who works for the state, and they will keep it. And then when he does something honorable, they will give it to him as a way of saying, oh, we honor you, and things like that. So people conscripted by force, eating, sleeping, living in the army, and just young people, men and women, forced to join and will not be able to back out, because the government will have something over them. And when the government is the only one doing well after an economic crisis, don't think that the people in the government are bankrupt. The people in the government are not bankrupt. The people in the government have stolen all the gold in the country. Right now, I brought that prophecy in 2020, I think. It's called From Underground. And the mirror prophecy to it is called The Betrayer Betrays. These people have taken all the gold out of the Federal Reserves. They say that we're off the gold standard. They're not off the gold standard. They have it. They've stolen all of it. Another one is called Underwater. The stock market is completely rigged. I saw things that I don't even understand. And people came after watching that prophecy and said, she doesn't even really know what she's describing, but this is exactly how it works. And then technical people in the comments of that prophecy were saying, it's like this and like this, what she's describing as little ants and this and that. This is actually how the indices work. And there you have it. So the government will be thriving. The government will be thriving off nepotism, cronyism, and just basically cheat. Okay, it's going to be a communist government where they will seize everything, and then they will always say they're seizing it for the Republic. They're seizing it for the Reich. They're actually seizing it for their personal consumption, and will leave people with nothing. And so when you see that the government is the only place where you can get meat, for instance, the government rations is the only place where Americans will be able to taste meat. will be able to taste some form of butter or a little bit of lard, just to get a fat in their diet. Fat is also essential for our diet. The only place where you can taste an avocado or actually drink orange juice, people need those things, and people covet the so-called, I won't even call them luxuries. Americans don't consider orange juice luxury, but I have subscribers who lived in Poland. They lived in Austria during the time just after. They were growing up in the time just after Hitler had basically devastated Europe. And they have come here and said, Celestial, I'm telling you, I never tasted orange juice. There's a lady who said she never tasted orange juice until she came to America. When her family immigrated here, that was the first time that she actually just got to pour it and taste it, because it was for the rich where she lived. It was not for people like her. She was considered too low, too ordinary. And yet she's an ordinary citizen who should have access to everything that her nation had. But there was a sharp divide between the very upper, wealthy, ruling, militarized group and the ordinary people. And they keep that divide so that the ordinary people will suffer and be willing to do anything just for an actual hot dog. You can bring an informant in the beast system, and the way to crack him is just to bring a cup of coffee and a steaming hot dog and place them on the table as the officer and start eating it and saying, yes, okay, I'm listening. Do you have anything to say? Nothing to say? Okay. And you eat that. The smell of the coffee, that man watching you with the hot dog, and then you ask him, would you like one? And then he's quiet. And then you call for it and you put it on the table and you say, all you have to do is tell us what you know. That man will do it. America is the nation that created the Matrix. What did the betrayer in the movie The Matrix do? Did he not sell everybody out for the illusion of a steak that wasn't even real? Yes, he did. He wanted to taste meat. He was tired of life in the raw reality of the beast system. And he sold everybody out for a plate of meat. And before he did it, Esau did it. So then nothing is too far-fetched when I'm speaking to you about the things that God has pressed upon my heart in my secret time with him. Many of the times, it's him who will initiate these things, because I'm not going to him and asking him, okay, Lord, tell me about showering in the beast system. No, for God to bring this up, he's showing. And he will simply refer to the shower to say, you won't be taking it at your house. You'll be taking it on the SSSTS out at sea, waiting for Russia or whoever to engage. So for the benefits, just to have food, just to have shelter, if God is telling this nation that the army is where shelter is going to come from, then he's saying something very serious. Home ownership is going to become a zero pipe dream. If you have to go to the army to get a place to sleep, then that means that you're on the same level as a person who's in the jail, because the person in the jail, that's where he sleeps. That's his bunk. So with army life being much more tolerable to civilian life, Yah says it will be very easy to see why some people would sign up. And now we come to the final message, the one that is literally titled Vindication, October the 18th, 2024. I've read to you the two scriptures out of Revelation chapter 18 and verse 9 that speaks of destruction in a single hour, and Revelation chapter 18 and verse 19 that says that the merchants were crying, they were throwing dust on their heads, they were sympathizing, they were weeping and wailing because they were watching the smoke of the burning of Babylon, and they were asking themselves, how can this great city burn? And then they say in verse 19, alas, this great city that had so many ships on the sea carrying all her wealth, so that all the rest of us became rich as we participated in merchant trade with her. In a single hour, in 1 hour, Mystery Babylon suffers her judgments. Hear the word of the Lord. All America's judgments will come flooding upon her. In 1 hour, in a single moment of time, the things you have been hearing about will converge on this nation like a plague of locusts, sighting a green field from afar. As one company, just like locusts advancing on a field that they've seen from afar to strip it bare and leave nothing behind them, so America's judgments will find her at one point in time. It will be like predators falling on a wild animal that has wandered unwisely into their midst. They will fall upon this nation at one convergent point in time. Economic warfare from the top down. Everybody will feel the grip of the economy going into death spasms, and people will throw their valuables away on the stock market, hoping to get rid of it and keep their wealth. But it will cause a glut, and the market will plummet to an all-time low. The American Dow Jones index will crash, and every other market attached to it will suffer the same fate. So the primary financial prophecy, there are about 20 or 25 of them, but there is no financial prophecy playlist, which is kind of odd, actually. I will see about making one. There's no financial prophecy. There's no financial playlist prophecy. So that means I haven't actually sat down to put all of them. But the ones that are coming to my mind, the one that's coming to my mind peak is called Nothing But Scattering. And that one is a live prophecy. Basically, we were on the line and we were praying. And I just began to say, who, this, that. The American economy is going to completely crash. Europe, why did you tie yourself to America? Europe, you're going to suffer the same fate as America. And God says this will teach you to hitch your wagon to people who can't balance their books. America's books are cooked. America lies so much that the liars can't even keep track of the amount of lies that they have lied in the time period during which they have lied the lies that they lie. They don't know what is left, what is right. God says that they have been so creative with the numbers in this country, but whether it is the Fed, whether it is the whatever it is, the Reserve Bank, whatever it is, American economy is going to crash flat out. The prophecy to hear about how every single bank in America is going to crash out, flame out, and wink out of existence. Banking as we know it will wink out of existence. And when we wink again, we will be seeing beast credits, money in the cloud. That's the nascent rise of coin. The prophecy to hear about how all banks, I'm talking about the top bank that you are with, that you are always told through Bloomberg and everything else that there is 0% chance of that bank crashing. I'm talking about the bank that buys out other banks when they crash. The prophecy is called systemic risk. They're all going to crash. God says not a single bank is going to survive the economic downturn that is going to come to the United States. It's systemic risk. It's nascent rise of coin. It's money down the drain. The U.S. economy is going to lose 60% of the value on the books. The U.S. dollar is going to be devalued by 60%. And in that prophecy from 2018, money down the drain, I saw that people hated America so much. I saw that people hated this country to the point that they were attacking embassies. Anywhere that they saw the U.S. flag flying in foreign countries became a subject of attack. They were taking the flag, they were burning it, and they would spit. Anytime an American would walk by, they could discern that you're American, they would spit on the ground as you walked by. That's how much people hated this country, because this country caused mass devastation and instant overnight poverty. I saw that nations in South America were very heavily affected because of what America had done to cause a global world crash of currency. Okay, basically a wipeout of the global economy. It was caused by the United States, and people hated America so much. And there was revolutionary fever in the air against her. And that was the dream from 2018. And basically, let me go back from the top. God is saying that all the judgments that are going to come to America are going to come to a convergent point. So convergent point, all you have to think of is a very sharpened pencil. Don't even think of a pen. Think of a good quality Staedtler German pencil, red and white, classic, sharpened to a point. That is the point at which all of the painful things that have been discussed here on the Master's Voice Prophecy blog are going to peak at what God is calling a single moment of time, 1 hour. So whether it's economic crash, whether it's anti-government sentiment in the country that leads to separating along areas of ideology, areas of sociology, areas of race theory, areas of whatever you want to call it, the nation separating itself, areas of gender wars. It's all going to culminate the rise of the reprobates, coming down of the aliens, takeover of the Nephilim, Russia attacking Chinese bombs, floating into the country, coming up from the scuba diving submarines and flooding the mainland, coming into the suburbs, rounding people up, bringing us out in the cold, as I saw. All of it, everything, the captivity, all of it, God says, in a moment of time. In a moment of time. I'm not going to venture, is it one actual day? Or is it like a time period where they say in that day, and then it's basically talking of a time period of just calamity and woes. All I know is that, not to mention the natural disasters, America will not get any rest. It will be the fulfillment of what God said to Jeremiah. Said, Jeremiah, if you cannot even run with the footmen and they made you tired, if you were running with the footmen, if you were handling prophetic breakouts against Texas and flooding in Texas and flooding in Florida and this happening in California, starting to almost have a tremor every day, a tremor or 5 every day, and earthquakes here and bad weather here and all this and the economy and the political shakings. If you can't handle all that stuff, when it's only a little bit, how will you run with horses if you can't run with the men? Basically, God is asking what I always ask here. You come and you are so livid at hearing prophecy. I will post my own video that someone has made for me as a courtesy, and then 90,000 people are complaining I could do without the sound effects. You better get used to the sound of bombs. If it's the sound of bombs that are triggering your anxiety, my advice to you is to work on that anxiety. Because this is not a group project. This is not a team A. If you want to get your own A, you have to find your own thing that you will do to serve God. This is not a group project. I'm not running surveys. I'm not taking audience participation papers to ask you, what were your thoughts on the last video? Can I just get an anonymous feedback? There's nothing like that going on. So if the mere sound of someone else serving God and making a video, and I'm so busy that I barely have time to cut my own videos, if not for these helpful people on TikTok who cut the videos, animate it, however, and when I see it, my soul is moved and I think this is a good one and I put it up, and then you want to come as Elton John to critique it for what reason? For why? For what cause? Because your nerves are shaky. Work on your nerves. If you don't like the sound of bombs, get used to the sound of bombs, because the sound of bombs are going to be all over the American continent one day. And if you are still alive, you're going to hear them. And guess what? There will be nowhere else to drop your notes, fill in your little piece of paper and mail it in and say, Jesus, I don't like the sound of bombs, because now it's also followed by the sound of screaming and blood, which I also don't like. You need to grow up out there. You also are very ungrateful, some of you, and you complain so much, and you are a nuisance. You are an absolute nuisance and a child as well. And you need to be told that. Imagine we are in the end times. You cannot handle the telling of the matter. How will you manage at the doing of the matter, at the fulfillment of the matter? You cannot hear of the wrath without shaking and without becoming salty and trying to push back and talk about, well, I doubt the credibility. Who cares what you doubt? Who actually cares when these things are keeping me up until 4 o'clock in the morning? If you can't handle the hearing, the telling of the matter in which you are not touched, tomorrow you wake up and you have a full breakfast in front of you. You are not an Iraqi who is wondering about food and the cost of living and your unstable society that the Americans gave you and left you with as a legacy for the last 20 years. You're not celebrating the bombing of your grandma from the 2003 Basra invasion. None of that is happening to you. You wake up, you're going to have a shower, water's going to come into your house, easy peasy, at the turn of a tap. You've never gone to a well in your life. In your life as an American, you've never seen a well to draw water out of it unless you were doing it as a farmhouse aesthetic. What are you complaining about? How do you plan to cope in the days of trial and persecution? How do you plan to cope when we become the object of everyone's hatred? when the time of persecution arises against the church. And Daddy God, Abba Father, Jesus hasn't flown you off in the rapture that you think is going to take you away from this. If we cannot handle hearing what has been in the Bible for centuries, that in a single hour, this nation, all her woes and calamities, God says all the things that you have been hearing about here on the Master's Voice Prophecy blog are going to converge upon the United States at a single moment in time. None of us knows the exact moment in time, but at one moment in time, we're going to wake up, and just like life shifted forever in COVID, we woke up and found the world different. We woke up and found emergency measures, new regulations, mandates, stay-at-home orders, curfews, locked borders in some cases, no travels, airports shut down, Times Square silent for the first time in its life. For the first time in its life, silent. We woke up and the world had changed. In the same way, Yah says it will change again. And he says that the plagues, the way that they will come, will be like a group of locusts that just saw greenery in the distance. They saw a flourishing field in the distance, and as one man, they move with this hive mind. They will just come upon America and chew and eat and strip it. And God says when the locusts lift up, basically when America's troubles lift up and we get a good look at her, he said the nation will be stripped bare and there will be nothing left. And that is how judgment is going to find us, at a single sharp pencil point in time. Like predators tearing a wild animal that made the mistake of wandering in their midst. Tearing that animal, trouble will fall upon this nation at one convergence point. So that convergence point, you can easily basically just say the catalyst point, whatever that will be, whatever that particular thing will be. And so I know one convergence point that is coming to my mind right now, and I'm not going to hesitate to say it, is that how God said at the time that Donald Trump will be killed, it will be exactly like the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand that happened, that struck off an entire world war. It was a catalyst that set many bad locust points, many small pots that were boiling already between those states and boiling in the world stage. When that man was shot, it was basically a catalyst, a convergence point, and before you know it, the whole world tumbled into war. That is definitely one convergence point, one catalyst that the Lord has spoken of here repeatedly concerning how America ends up tumbling into her warfare. And then he says, economic warfare, everybody feeling the grip of the economy as it goes into its death throes. So the economy contracting, less available, less for businesses, less profit margins. And that's not just because the businesses aren't making money, it's less profit margins because those at the top are taking 7-figure salaries. They're taking 8-figure salaries and still paying people less than a living wage, taking away people's Medicare, taking away people's private, they take away the private medical assistance of the executives, taking away perks, taking away benefits, trying to basically strip jobs and leave them as bare bones as possible, and the economy dying and everyone feeling it. Yah says every wallet feeling it until it gets to the point, please listen, that Yah says the people who are holding valuable stock, when they start to see how the economy begins to plummet, and valuable stock starts to be completely useless, he says everybody will start to sell, trying to get their money out of the stock market. But he says it will simply cause a glut. And a glut is basically what happens when you make too much of something and you think that there's a demand for it and you think that people are going to buy it. And then you make a lot of it and everybody thinks, oh no, this is going to be the next hot thing. So everybody makes a lot of it. And then guess what? There's overproduction and not enough people are drawing that thing out of the economy to themselves. And then the market is said to be flooded. It causes a glut, an overabundance of something that nobody wants. And so if the market starts falling and everybody goes, oh no, it's losing value. Sell now. And then they throw back all the shares and he says it will just cause the market to crash even further. It's going to plummet to an all-time low. And he's talking about the Dow Jones, to which many international stock markets are either tied or affiliated or reflective of. When the Dow does this, then other markets does that responsively or sometimes reactively to what the Dow is doing. He says every other market that's attached to the American Dow will suffer the same fate, and that is to utterly crash. And then we come now to the last part of the prophecy, to this servant of God. And the Lord really surprised me when he began to talk about this man, not because he hasn't spoken of the man before, but because the Lord just basically picked up conversation about this man from nowhere. So hear what the Lord has to say about the man of God who stood so tall, who stood so firm in the United States, a man whose heart was truly after God, a man who really loved God and pursued God, and his passion for God was always evident in the way that he spoke. And the Lord actually made reference to the way this man spoke and said that this man's heart was so broken towards the end of his life. His heart was so broken, and his heart was so pressured and so beleaguered with worry for his beloved America, because from that pulpit in that big, impossible church, a powerful dream realized in that church that man established in the heart of this cesspool known as New York City. His voice became what we call tremulous, meaning that one speaks with so much passion that the vocal cords can't always sustain it, or because of reason of age or overly carrying emotion in the voice begins to tremble even in a male. It wouldn't be so remarkable in a female, but in a male voice that is usually very strong, very staunch, when you start to get tremors in the voice, when the voice becomes tremulous, it can sometimes be by reason of age, but it is often by reason of strong emotion, passion. And God spoke of this man's voice and said, towards the end of his life, his voice gave him away. How worried he was for America because of her hard heart, and because of her deep running pride. Pride is like, in fact, I'm going to share that vision that the Lord gave me. It's not written down, but I will share it. Prayer is like a rod of iron in the hearts of the American people. And the Lord gave me a vision recently. It's not even 2 months that I've seen it, maybe probably last month, October, where I saw a heart. I saw a human heart. I was standing by my window and I was looking out, and then just in front of me, I started to see the human heart, but the heart it wasn't a full color vision whereby you see the human heart and it's red and it's got the little valves going off the way we usually know it. No, I was seeing a negative of the human heart. So it was as if somebody had taken an x-ray inside a person and was holding up the x-ray, but without the x-ray borders, without the x-ray papers. All I was seeing was the human heart. And there was something in there. There were the way you can see my fingers, if you can't see my fingers, there were two things like this curved. Like they started off not too curved. There were two sticks like this in the heart. And I was thinking, what is this? First of all, couldn't even tell it was a heart. And then I was like, oh, it's a human heart. But why is it black? And then I realized, oh, it's a negative. This is a negative. This is an x-ray of the human heart. But what is that in there? Because even if you're looking at the x-ray of a heart, you can see that you're supposed to be able to see the thick, dark lines showing upper chamber, lower chamber, like that. But I wasn't seeing that. I was just seeing the heart with the valve sticking, and I knew, okay, this is how the human heart looks. But the only thing that was showing up on the x-ray of the heart were two sticks like this, two rods like this, parallel to each other. And I was thinking, what is that? What is that, Lord? And it came upon my heart, that celestial is the rod of pride. That is the rod of pride inside the hearts of these people. And then as I'm looking, the rods constrict about a few centimeters. So they're pretty much straight, and then they constrict a little bit and they bend. And when they bend, the heart becomes a little smaller. It goes from being a normal size and the heart constricts a little bit. Why? The heart is being made to shrink inside because these rods are hardening themselves. And I was thinking of the grandfather of heart hardening, Pharaoh from the book of Exodus. That thing, every time it constricted, the heart was forced to become smaller because those rods were so powerful. Listen, those iron rods inside the heart of flesh were so powerful that when they constricted, they dug into the flesh of the person, and it was almost as if the person was suffering mini heart attacks. And for the heart to stop itself being gouged by those two rods of pride, it shrank. Because what will happen if the heart is fleshy, just imagine the heart as fleshy as a watermelon, and someone takes a fork and begins to dig, and that watermelon tries to resist the iron tines of a fork. What do you think is going to happen to the watermelon? Is it not going to become overly gouged and pitted? What chance has any watermelon in the history of fruit ever stood against someone with a fork or a metal spoon getting ready to start scooping in it and taking chunks out of it? Every time that rod bent, hardening itself against God's word, hardening against what God was saying, the heart just, and the heart became smaller and smaller and smaller. And I was watching that rod, those two rods inside a human heart, turning the heart until it was becoming as small as a chestnut, as a large chestnut, or some kind of fruit much smaller than the human heart could be. And God was showing me that's the process these people are going through. Every time they hear the prophetic word of the Lord, they mock. Every time they hear the word of the Lord, they scoff. They say that it is not true. They say that it is a lie, but they go so far into deadly blasphemous territory, saying that it is satanic work that I'm doing here, that the words emanate and originate from Satan, from the dark kingdom. God, your God, the God who made this world, the God who has formed these blasphemous tongues of the people that come here from all nations, led by America. You say that you attribute his words to Satan. I saw those two rods, twin rods, just one above another, and they would bend at the same time in the heart, getting smaller and smaller, shrinking on the x-ray, becoming a small, dried up, hardened thing. And the rods just inside, commanding unbelief, pride, rudeness, rejection, like that. Unbelief, doubt. But what about this? But what about that? Hardening themselves against the word of God. Well, this man, Pastor David Wilkerson, saw all that. He stood at the pulpit for decades, preaching, fiery, so lit up. But his life took an unexpected trajectory when, as the Lord says, he allowed that man to look through the lens, to see through God's eyes, to a time that scandalized that man. What David Wilkerson saw scandalized him. And part of it was because of the timing that God allowed this man to see. Just a moment, please. I'm going to share something briefly from myself. I don't want to share it. I paused the video because I could feel the Lord speaking to me to share it. And I will just do it to be obedient to him. I don't like sharing anything from myself because it really is like taking your most precious jewelry and putting it in the nose of a pig because of the way that the majority of people respond to it. They just kick it around like a football and they think it's something to mock. They think it's yet another chink in the armor. But not everyone responds that way. And for the sake of being obedient, I will say this. When I came to New York, I needed a church. I was in New Jersey. And the church that I had in New Jersey was absolutely fantastic. It's the kind of church that it just brings you to your knees every time in brokenness of worship before the Lord. The pastor had a golden staircase. to heaven. And that church, it was a haven for me. It was a home. Every time that the door was open for a worship service, every time the door was open for a prayer meeting, even the women that would run the prayer meetings in the afternoons and things like that, you just make time and you go there, because God would always show up. If it was a small group, God would show up. And then the Lord spoke to me and told me, I want you to go to New York City. I want you to move to New York City. And so I moved to New York, and I was here. And my habit is, whenever I go somewhere, I have to find a church. I need to be in a church somewhere. And of course, coming to New York City, the atmosphere is so different. A lot of people will come and think, oh, the Big Apple. No, you come here and the first thing that will touch you as a spiritual person is heaviness. It's such a heavy city because there's such big daddy demons here in this city, because every kind of sin is on the books. Every kind of sin in America, it can be found here in New York City. It's open for business. And so when I came here, my first week, just resting and acclimatizing and everything like that. And then the Lord spoke to me so clearly in prayer and told me that I want you to go to Times Square Church. Now, I don't know what Times Square Church is. All I know is I don't think God is serious, because I've been to Times Square. I've been to Times Square on holiday, and there's no church that can survive in that city ghetto. I don't care if it's the most expensive real estate in the city. It's just an overpriced, highly decorated ghetto. And so I thought, I don't think that this is God, because Times Square is Times Square. Times Square is its own vibe. No one in their right mind would establish a church there. And so I didn't even bother looking on the internet to see if there was a church there. I just put it to the side, spent my first week, my second week, and then the Lord would say to me, my daughter, you need a church, and I want you to go to the church that is in Times Square. And then I began to question the Lord. Yes, with resistance. My Father, I've just come from from a long season in an amazing, immersive church. Why would I want to go to a church that is in the same place where women shake their breasts without anything on them? The naked cowgirl is there. The naked cowboy is there. It is bound to be a compromised church. It is bound to be a church that doesn't know you. It is bound to be a church of no power. It is probably bound to be a church dabbling in the occult, sitting in the midst of one of the most decadent parts of the United States. Lord, please consider my request. I'm looking for a church where I can grow. I'm looking for a church where I can be planted. I'm looking for a church where I can blossom and bloom. And I made my prayer request and I laid it before the Lord, and all the Lord would come back with when I would take up this issue of, Father, I'm in a new place. I need a place, because we're like tomato vines. Tomato vines can bear good fruit. If you have a good tomato line, a good tomato seed, you can get very good fruit off of it. But then you can't leave the vine laying along the ground, because even the little ants will take their little bites out of it. Ants will bite it. Little ground mites will bite it. Rabbits will get to it and everything. And also the fruit will develop poorly. You have to wrap a vine around a stick. To get good tomatoes, you have to wrap them going up. Nobody ever leaves their tomatoes just laying wild along the ground, because that's a recipe for disaster. So in the same way, human souls need to be wrapped around the pole of a very good church, so that you can grow upward and you're not just low-lying fruit for predators and small animals to nibble on. Then all day long you're walking around talking about, I'm depressed and I don't know why. It's because you're sitting by yourself. You think you're Moses, Joseph, and Elijah all mixed into one, and you can just be at home, a church for one. But anyway, the Lord kept pressing it on me. And so I began to endeavor to go to this church. Every time I endeavored to go to the church, I'd oversleep. I looked on the internet and I found out where it was, and I would oversleep. I would miss the 10 o'clock. I would miss the 12 o'clock. And then I would say, well, Lord, you see, it's just too late to go. So maybe next week. And then it would happen. Even if I had an alarm, I would sleep through it. And then the Lord said to me strongly, I want you to go to the church that is in Times Square. And I was like, well, okay, Lord. Sunday came. I missed the morning one again, and I missed the other one, but I didn't want to really offend the Lord anymore. And so I made the very long journey from Staten Island to Manhattan for the 6 p.m. service. And when I got to the church and I walked in, I was greeted by very friendly people in the front, and they directed me. And I walked in as the worship had already started. Maybe they'd sung 1 or 2 songs. So I walked in as the worship had already started. And I don't know, there was this explosive feeling that happened in me when I walked into the church. My heart is like my heart left my body and just flew up to the roof of the building, just like, it was just like home. It was such an odd feeling for me, because usually I'm so guarded in a church because people be crazy in churches. The churches of America are insane. Not all of them, but too many of them to be unguarded. And that is just my view because of the ones that I have been to. And so I just felt this thing like God is here. The worship in that church is unmatched. People travel from all around the world. Atheists. People go to Times Square Church, to walk in Times Square Church just to hear the singing and leave. They don't even stay for the word. I know, because I was in the church and I would see them. They would come and they would have to control themselves because you're not allowed to take pictures because it's a church. It's not a tourist destination. But anyway, I sat down and I had such an amazing service. The 6 p.m. service doesn't really focus on the word. They usually have a little bit of the word, but it's testimony based. And I kept hearing testimony after testimony after testimony that was perfect to my life at that time, which is something that God will do, his way of confirming you're in the place that I want you to be. And that's why obedience is such a wonderful fruit. That is why obedience is such a wonderful indication of God's children, that they love him. God doesn't eat mouth love. Oh Lord, I love you. I love you. God eats obedience. That is what he receives. That is what he loves. That is what causes his own countenance to beam. And then on the back of obedience, when you say to the Lord, I really love you, he knows you are telling the truth because your obedience has led the way and gone before you to lay it down that it's a fact that you do love him. And so I had an amazing service, and I remember saying to the Lord, my Father, you're always right. And I'm sorry that I dragged my feet to come here. This is clearly a place where you are. This is clearly a place that you want me to be. And I thank you for bringing me here. Service is over. I go off into the lobby and I would like to use the ladies' room. And they have a ladies' room on the ground floor, but they tend to reserve it for older patrons. And the reason for that is because everything else, other washrooms are upstairs, and there's a winding staircase. When you walk in through the front doors, there's a very majestic staircase. This used to be an old theater house that they've converted into a church. This man raised money by faith and bought this place at a time when $1 was worth $100 in terms of no inflation and everything else back then. He raised that money by faith, bought that place and renovated and turned it into a house of worship for his God, keeping most of the fixtures in place. And he faced all the criticism of, why would God need such an opulent house? And then he just politely said, why don't you ask Solomon that? And he continued on with the vision that God had planted in his heart. Solid man, fixed in his faith. But anyway, they tell me, well, this one down here is usually under a lot of pressure. The older patrons, they're using canes. So if you don't mind, please go up to the first floor. And I look at that staircase and I almost say to myself, it's not worth it. I'll keep it or whatever. But I decide, let me go, because it's a long way back to where I live. As I head to the bottom of the staircase, I'm frozen looking at 2 pictures. I'm frozen looking at the picture of Pastor David Wilkerson and his wife, and it's saying in memoriam, it's saying rest in peace. And I was startled, stunned, and shocked to find out that this man in 2016 had been 5 years dead. And the reason I was startled and shocked is because in 2013, while listening to a podcast, David Wilkerson's voice came on with that quivering. And I remember listening to a sermon on holiness and thinking, who is this man with the wave in his throat? Who is this man with waves in his throat? This man sounds so burdened. This man sounds so this. And I never heard a prophetic message from Pastor Wilkerson. I never heard the man before, and I never listened to any prophecy from him. All that would come on, if you tune in and one podcast thing is rolling into another, it simply puts the person's name there, and then it would say something like "Holiness is its own reward" or "Stand and protects the battleground." That kind of message is what I listened to from him for almost a straight year. And his teaching was so grounded, and I became so enamored of the man with the wave in his voice that it never occurred to me for a second that I was listening to a dead person. It never occurred to me for 1 second that this person who preached with so much fiery passion, akin to Billy Graham, but in his own lane, that this man was no longer with us. And so I became accustomed to seeing the name on that podcast. I became accustomed to seeing that name on the audio file pop up. And so imagine I get to the stairs and there is a head and shoulders painting of this man with a shock of white hair and a severe expression and piercing blue eyes. And I see the name. And I almost exclaimed out loud as if to say, he's not alive? He's dead? This is his church, this place that I feel the connection. And so that is how I came to know of this man, and did not know that this man later is the author of the famous prophecy given to America about all the things that would happen to her. That is known as the Vision of 1973. The Vision of 1973. Had no idea that this man is the one who authored this until later God would come and mention this man and say that this man said about Russia, that Russia would come here, along with Dmitry Duduman, which led me down another rabbit trail as I was sitting in a laundromat. I think this would now be 2020. I think it was COVID 2020 or 2021 when I was sitting and the Lord said to me, my daughter, do not be disheartened. My daughter, do not be downhearted. You are not alone in these messages, because people were giving me so many donkey kicks, so much pushback with their double rod hearts. Oh no, it's a lie. It's not true. How dare you, America, pretend that you have no idea of these prophecies when you have received these prophecies on a loop decade after decade? How dare you act like it's brand new to you when people have come here previously, raised from among you and brought from other lands to prophesy to you on the dot, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. You received these prophecies, dancing your way through the disco era and acting like you have never heard of them before, when there's an entire library sticking all the way back to 1930 with William Branham, indicting you that you have heard them and that you do know, and that you have been warned on a continuous loop that if this nation continued in the path that it was going, whoever was alive at the time of the convergence point would eat the fruit of all the prophetic voices that had come. How dare you pretend as if you never heard these things before? And only a few people will admit, yes, I watched this person, and yes, it is true what you're saying because that other person said it. Acting as if you have no idea until God has to come and tell me at 11 p.m., washing my clothes in a Brooklyn laundromat, my daughter, you are not alone. I sent voices prior to you. Look for David Wilkerson and look for Dmitry Duduman. Both of them spoke of this Russian invasion. And then I start looking them up. And a non-English speaker is coming up and giving his testimony through his young grandson. His grandson is translating for him as he also shares his woes and sorrows as being uprooted from his home and brought to a nation that continually mocked him and rejected him, acting unto him as if they had not heard David Wilkerson 10 years prior. 1984 or 1983, Dmitry Duduman prophesied that Russia was going to come here. He also prophesied that he gazed across the nation and America was lit on fire. But when David Wilkerson said that there was going to be 1,000 fires burning in New York, obviously because of the amount of bombs and nukes she's going to eat, he was called a doom and gloom man. He was told that he was walking outside of his lane. I have some of the insults that he was told, except that back in the 70s, of course, they were polite insults, not like the type now. Nobody dared to call that man a warlock or accuse him of Satanist views. David Wilkerson will be vindicated. The words of that man will be proven to be not ahead of its time after all, because he was looking through God's lens, looking prophetically at a time that has rushed upon America in what seems to be no time at all. Pastor Wilkerson will be proven right in all that he said of the Lord, for he was effectively silenced by his colleagues of the time, who thought he was too vocal about things that could never happen to America. Yet now, see, precious little of what he said has not happened yet, and only a little of it remains to be seen. He was called an alarmist. He was called an agitator. He was called a so-called prophet, and was told by many not to venture out of his lane as a pastor. He was often called a predictor of doom and gloom. In fact, at the time that Pastor Wilkerson was visited by God to hear and see certain things, many American churches were skeptical to begin with that any other gifts were operational outside of evangelical, pastoral, and teaching gifts. The apostolic and prophetic functions were sharply curtailed in America back then, which is why everyone would look upon an actual prophecy with so much skepticism and, in many cases, outright unbelief. They did not widely believe that God was still moving in those gifts in the first place. So then it was doubly hard for them to accept that should God start using such gifts as the gift of prophecy, he would certainly not choose to say all these so-called scary and harsh things to his beloved America. And so before I begin to look at just a few things that you can still find up online, just a few things that this man said, I'm going to go back to the beginning. David Wilkerson is no longer with us. He lost his life on April the 27th, 2011. He died in a way that most people would think God must hate this man. He died in a head-on collision with an 18-wheeler. Those of you outside the country, just think of whatever massive trucks. I'm talking about the long, long, long ones that transport logs or that transport your food and your goods to the various major city centers of your nation. That is the kind of truck that smashed into that man's car. I think he was with his wife. She was extremely badly injured. Her name is Gwendolyn, but he died instantly. He died there. And so God is speaking of this servant that came to America, a man who used to live somewhere out in the boonies. And God spoke to that man and told him, after taking him through an intense period of cleansing, God spoke to that man and told that man to come to New York City and to minister to the youth there, the youth in drugs, the youth in drink, the youth in crime, the youth in gangs. And this man came and basically started a revolution in a city that, though it was glorious, the underbelly of the city was so seedy and so grungy that it was eating up the young people in crime, sin, filth, and fornication at very young ages. And so that man came, and in a city where many, many, many people with all their money and all their so-called anointing and all their so-called everything would not succeed, this man, God blessed him to build a basic edifice as proof of what faith can do. And then his life took a turn when God brought him this vision. And from the time he got this vision in 1973, apparently, God then began to visit him prophetically, adding on parts so that he prophesied even well into the early 90s. And he didn't prophesy the way a lot of people would do. A lot of people like to steal the prophetic function. God will give them a message here and a message there. And then if the message is provocative enough, they begin to style themselves as an actual prophet. They begin to call themselves, I am prophet, so and so. They take up a title, they take up a this, they take up a that. And then very soon when they come under pressure because they don't have any new words from the Holy Spirit, they then begin to say, I just feel like God is saying. Right there, that's a lie. That's a lie. Because God will just say it and you will say the Lord is saying. The minute you say, I just feel like, no, forget it. You've already started to venture off into the potato cornfields and carry all the vulnerable, gullible, easily fooled people with you into the potato cornfields. So this man never did that. He never ever said that he was a prophet. He remained what he knew he was called as, and the fruit born out in him, a pastor. But it seemed like God activated a vein in him that God would then come and press that vein, and out of him would bubble things that he saw. He was very much active in visions, seeing things, and also sometimes in having a dream. And God is saying that this man will be vindicated. When God says that he has sent his word through someone and that person is going to be vindicated, God is basically telling you what I explained for 3 or 4 minutes in the beginning. God is telling you that you have missed a window. The minute you hear the word vindication, you must understand that someone in the conversation is wrong. The minute you hear the word vindicated, someone in the conversation is wrong. And the reason someone in the conversation is wrong is because somebody spoke first and said A, B, C, D, E. And then somebody else said, it's not A, B, C, D, E for these reasons. This is the wrong dispensation. God no longer has prophets. God is not speaking to the church. The last prophet was John the Revelator in the book of Revelation, and this and that. So it's not A, B, C, D, E, because if there's no God who's speaking, and then God is also stopped speaking to John, John was the last one, then that means that A, B, C, D, E cannot exist, which means you are a liar. The problem is that David Wilkerson's fruit was very hard to call lies. The church he pastored was not a lie. His track record of loving people and building strong believers, because when he was alive, he did not preach a lukewarm or a compromised gospel. That man's voice was a mallet, a hammer, and a sword at the same time, even before it developed the tremor. So, with the fruit of who he was in front of them, they stopped just short of insulting him and calling him a false prophet. The way that they would embarrass David Wilkerson in his lifetime was to constantly tell him his prophecy had failed. His prophecy was not for that time. David Wilkerson, because of the urgency of the things that he saw, often believed, much like Apostle Paul, if you read Paul's writings and you understand them very well. Apostle Paul thought everything that he was saying was for now. Apostle Paul actually lived and believed that Jesus was coming back in his lifetime. That is why he stayed ready and died ready. I bet the most surprised person to find out that he was going to die and Jesus wasn't coming back was Paul. He lived ready. He stayed ready. His faith was so great that he was ready for the Lord's return in his lifetime. And that therefore, the beauty of Paul's writings is that if they are read and understood properly by the people in the Christian church, they are also supposed to produce generation after generation of generation after Christians who live and stay ready for an imminent return from the Lord, which is no evil way to live at all. It is an excellent way to live. The worst type of way to live is to think that you have the right to grow old up to gray hairs and that Jesus will not come and surprise you like a thief in the night, which he always says that he will be like. No one knows, he says, when the thief will come, because if a man knew when the thief was coming, then he would arise, Jesus says, and protect his goods. Paul lived ready, so Paul wrote ready, and Paul's words are a blessing to us because when imbibed and received correctly, Paul's words are supposed to keep us ready at all times, but we are not like that. Everybody has this, when I die and my great-grandchildren die, then Jesus will come back. That is why this blog is so hated by people, because The presence of the prophetic words let you know that you are the star and I the co-star in everything that God is saying. It's very much a right now blog. And so when God pressed this vein in this man and this man began to bring these things out, he thought that they were imminent. He wrote in an imminent fashion and he attached dates to them. And this is where his community snagged him. This is where they said, when he said a terrible calamity in 1992 was coming, and he said it was imminent even within the next year. When it didn't come, then they said, because they couldn't say Wilkerson, false prophet, then they said, Wilkerson, your prophecy has failed. But David Wilkerson's prophecy hasn't failed. David Wilkerson's prophecy has fulfilled multiple times in the earth concerning, for instance, economic crash. America ate this thing while he was still living. He lived and he saw 2008. And he was too polite to ask them, so how's it going now? When the world was reeling drunk of 2008, he was still alive and he saw it. He's just not going to see the one that is going to basically have people naked. America, I hope you do not forget that God says that due to economic hardship in this country, just a moment, please, women's bare breasts would be seen. I prophesied this. God says that, Celestial, you will see bare breasts in the street. They will not have clothes to cover themselves. They will be so naked that whatever it is that they're using to try and cover themselves is going to be shredded. And he says the breasts that they can't cover now. You know yourself. Everyone has seen your breasts except the nipple part. Everyone has seen it because apparently the stars are now making the clothing just below the curve of decency, and then everything is overflowing. The cups overflow. So he said that the breasts you can't cover now, everyone will see it, except that the men will be too hungry and too physically weak to care. So the breasts that they want to see, when the breasts are on display due to poverty, hardship, and nakedness, unfortunately, the libido will not rise, because your libido cannot rise when you are starving, when you are homeless, when you are hungry, and when you are hopeless. And when you are forced into the army so you can have a bed to sleep in and a hot dog to eat. Wilkerson did not live to see the one that I have been given to prophesy, the one that will bring Mystery Babylon to her knees, the one from Revelation 19 that I just read you, that the merchants put dust on their heads. Putting dust on your head is an action of hopelessness, utter hopelessness. The bottom completely falling out of global markets. America, the great trader, no longer able to trade. Destroyed, as the Bible says, in a single hour. He didn't get to see that one. So God says he will be vindicated and that all his words will be proven not to be ahead of its time at all. Now, Pastor Wilkerson's words were outside of his available lifespan. But that does not mean that his prophecy is ahead of its time. That doesn't mean that its prophecy is ahead of its time at all, because Pastor David Wilkerson's prophecies were the kind of prophecies that we call era prophecies. An era prophecy will run for the totality of an era. And from the time he was giving them, in 1970 something, it has not yet, for instance, reached 2070 something to say that a whole 100 years has run, an era has finished, an epoch or whatever it is has finished. It hasn't finished. It's just that his life ran out in the bit. But then God was well pleased with this man. God was happy with his servant. And also God, being that compassionate one that he is, could see that even though Pastor Wilkerson was living, he died just shy of 80 years, and his wife died the year after she reached 80 years. Even though at 79, he was still alive and he was still whatever, even though he had handed over his church to his successor, God could see that his servant was suffering. And his servant was not suffering by disease. His servant was suffering at watching the wickedness of his people. God has spoken through me here before of how painful it is, these men, America, that you killed. You claim that you don't kill the prophets, but yet you do. And I'm glad that those who come to this blog can actually see America's attempt to kill me. Because when I started and I would read Revelation 18, one of the biggest excuses was, this cannot be us, Celestial, because we don't kill the prophets. But you do kill them. Yah says that you mock them, you reject them, and you forget that every prophet is bonded to their message. That when you are saying the message is a lie and calling them a liar, you are attempting to kill the living flame of prophecy within them. And who is the spirit of prophecy, America? Is the spirit of prophecy Pastor David Wilkerson? Is the spirit of prophecy Celestial? The spirit of prophecy is Jesus Christ, who lives within that person like a flame burning inside them, cooking inside them and saying, speak forth the word. And every minute that you're holding it back, every minute that you're too busy with a work project and he's saying, make my prophecy. And you're thinking, Lord, in all fairness, you can see me sitting here with these people. Are you saying I should whip out the tripod, which is at my house, and start making a video, hello again, in front of the workmates? No, he's not saying that, but he is pressing as if to say, your bread and butter is not this thing that you do. Your bread and butter is actually sitting in front of the tripod and saying, thus saith the Lord. America is a murderous nation with the blood of many disappointed people. Go and watch the prophecy that, well, there's several of them with the American flags, but it's the one where I was talking about all the presidents and their wives being men. In that prophecy is the one where God says America has caused many a prophetic messenger to go to their grave broken and bitter, watching after a lifetime of prophesying, after a lifetime of preaching and warning. And then when they're dying and they gaze out at the nation spiritually, about to say their goodbyes, God shows them, look, instead of bread, they have become rock. You spoke to them 60 years, 50 years, 40 years. You prophesied my word to them. And now that you come home to me, they are in a worse state than when I first sent you to them. This is the nation that kills the prophet. Not only kills the prophet in vitro, the little ones that are being born that would have been bringing the message of God to this dying nation, but you kill the living ones with your hard-heartedness, your wickedness, your school finger, your schoolmaster finger. I see this and I see that and this doesn't add up and that's a fake and that's how you're exposed. You fulfill Revelation 18 to a T. The reason that you fight Revelation 18 is because you do not know how to read and understand Revelation 18 in relation to the nation, and that is because of your two rods in your chest. And so, God says he allowed this man to see through his lens, and he will prove that this man's words were not ahead of its time at all, because he was looking through God's lens and he was looking prophetically at a time that God says that time has now rushed up on America in what seems to be no time at all. In no time at all, Americans who were living when Pastor David Wilkerson brought the vision are now forced to agree that, for instance, what he called a baptism of filth upon America. The man said that in this America, okay, one of the things that he said was that there would be so much filth on TV that it would even be allowed to be played in the daytime. Please bear in mind, this was the time when America had censorship. They had something called the Censorship Bureau. You couldn't just come and jiggle your goodies in a movie. It was not allowed. There was something called the Board of Censors. When you made a movie, you sent it to them in a little can. And then they would put it on the projector and watch it. And they would watch the whole thing to see whose ankle was showing. If Lauren Bacall was naked, they would be watching and they would say, no, this is far too racy for the American public. And your movie would not get shown. This is Leave It to Beaver time. This is family TV time, family friendly programs, Brady Bunch time. You couldn't just put anything on TV in the 50s and the 60s. Even the 70s was starting to get a little, and the wicked people were pushing for to dissolve any kind of oversight, any kind of censorship, and just saying it's a free country, we shouldn't have to be monitored. I always told you in the old prophecies, I used to tell you that Satan will not come and take the whole M&Ms like that. Everyone will see his action. What he will do is win over two M&Ms and have them arguing that, why do we have prohibition? Jesus drank wine. Paul told Timothy to take wine for his stomach. We need alcohol. Then two more would say, yeah, because they all want to drink. Then two more join. And eventually, Satan slowly takes the M&Ms until there are no righteous people on the righteous M&M side. He has all the M&Ms on the compromised sinner side. That is how he worked, by craft and slowly, until all the restraints were made. But even back then, David Wilkerson was told, you've missed it, Wilkerson. You've missed it. That's what they said when he brought the prophecy out. Because he said there would be a baptism of filth in the United States. He said that it would even make it to TV. He said that X-rated movies would be on TV. What do all the men do now when they go on business trips and they sit in the hotel? The first thing they do is go to X-rated cable and start watching porn. Porn is now available on TV. And he also said that there would be so much porn available on cable. Please listen to this. Porn will be on TV so freely that to compete with that, because it's paid programming, normal programming will start to put as much sex and pornographic acts as they can get away with in normal movies. They will start to put porn and sex acts, as much of it as they can, into the normal movies that they can get away with within legal limits. All the Bridgerton people report to the front. All the 50 Shades of Grey people report to the front. That is you that he was talking about. Everything on Netflix, next to everything on Netflix, is porn. But it's there as a movie. And then to make it even better, rating PG-13. And then you look at the rating and you say, oh, that's okay. And then you look in the corner, S, X, L, P, L for language, S for sex, all of it is up there. You look at that and you think, oh, click. Because why? Because it's on the normal programming channel. But a person in 1973 said this. He said that the biggest epidemic in America would be children hating their parents. Who's on trial now for shooting entire families? Who's on trial now? 15-year-olds and 17-year-olds for jumping on 35-year-old women in the street and raping them in broad daylight, brutally assaulting them, destroying a woman's life in a moment. Then you look at who's on trial. They're calling him Defendant X because he's 16, because he's 15 and a half. And he's a minor. They don't want to put his name in the public. Somebody who's about to go and serve time and become a registered sex offender. He said that the biggest epidemic in America would be children uttering the words, I hate you, to their parents. What do American children say now to their parents? What do they even say in the movies? I hate you. But he was speaking about it then. I'll read you what else he said. He said that there would be volatility, and this is not all of it. These are only a few of them that I picked. He said that South America would become increasingly volatile, reaching the point of a powder keg, and it would become prone to uprisings and things of that nature. There's Venezuela. There's Panama. What else has been happening in just the few years that I've been on the internet? How often has South America just blown up with issues and problems? He said the fury of nature would be unleashed. Floods, hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, and extremes of hot and cold would constantly increase in intensity. He said that basically it would get to the point where America would have a break from the natural disasters only briefly, that they were going to continue and continue with only small breaks from them. But for the most part, he said that these things, excuse me, please, that he called the fury of nature would cause the death of many people. He specifically said that furious hailstorms would fall in America and that the size of the boulders would be so big that they would destroy cars and kill people. And also, he said that he saw the rise of many epidemics around the earth. On this prophecy blog, God did not give me one sentence like this. Oh, he named them. The fever, from the Middle Ages will come back. Just the fever, God called it. Not scarlet fever, he just called it the fever. He called another one the ague, A-G-U-E, a particularly odd disease where you're burning up and freezing at the same time. You're shivering and you're cooking and nobody knows what temperature you will be in when you die. God has said that Ebola will rise. He has said that dengue fever will rise. On this, he has said that Marburg will rise. It's risen. There's been an outbreak of that. There's been an outbreak of what God described to me as hard white bumps on the torsos of the bodies. And then we saw the gay men. I think in 2022 or 2023, we saw the gay men with their large monkeypox sores on their bodies. God has been speaking of many old diseases that he said would come here, including the Black Death. Because on this prophecy, on this blog, God has prophesied that there would be such an explosion in rodents right here in America. Such an explosion in rodents, he said, I will cover and drown them in rats. And I spoke of the rats and I told you they will be out here the size of chipmunks, baby kitties, and big cats in the streets, carrying diseases with them. That will be part of the punishment that we will have in America. So epidemics he spoke of, and God has expanded and named them that he will judge this nation with. He said, anyone who's holding Western currency, this is dollars, pounds, Deutschmark, and now that we also know the euro has been created, he says they will be in a lot of trouble because the money will fail, causing huge economic downturn, debt, and what he called monetary confusion and despair. And he said that after that would come a new world monetary system where there would be strong calls to unite all global currency, and the world economists will be completely stumped and confused as to how the global economy crashed. They will not have any answers. All of those things you can find in Master's Voice Prophecy. So many of them, long and detailed. So you cannot say, oh, she heard of him, and then she came in, what? Then she came and wrote hours and hours and hours of detailed things that you're starting to see on the news, such as banks crashing. He also said that positive thinking would be shattered. Pastor David Wilkerson said that many well-meaning preachers would have their reality shattered when different calamities come upon America, because he said a lot of them think that their success in ministry comes from the power of positive thinking and also only positive preaching. Right? So it's the sugar that many of you are addicted to. Many people are addicted to. So when they come here, they get a jolt because there's no sugar here. There's no honey here. There's only the word of God here to build strong Christian soldiers who can survive the times that are coming. But he said that many pastors will have their reality shattered. I want to ask you, when your pastor is dealing with a shattered reality, what's he going to give you in a church when the economy crashes? What's he going to give you when the first Russian nuke lands somewhere? What is a positive thinking pastor that has listened to don't listen to the doom and gloom? She hates America. What is a person like that going to feed his flock? And some of them have 7,000. Some of them have 17,000. Robert Morris had almost 50,000 people in various campuses listening to his every word. What do pastors like that? What are they going to give you? When they've told you the prophecy is a lie, then the prophecy comes to your house. What can a positive thinker who is shocked by the things happening, he's not prepared for them, how can he teach and lead you and prepare you in that moment? Do you think that an empty well is able to pivot and become full of something that he can then ladle and give you? He's not prepared, so how can his people be prepared? Listen to this particular phrase. Pastor Wilkerson said there would be a few good years occurring back to back before the downfall and the downturn of America began. And he told them that when those years began, it would be God actually giving them time to prepare. 2 more good years is the name of the prophecy that God gave me in 2022. He said many nations will blame America for the economic crash. The USA will be the chief culprit, hated by everyone when the world economy crashes, with the nations across Europe and Japan at the forefront blaming America for what happens. That is my prophecy from 2018. money down the drain that I spoke of, with people spitting everywhere. There was an American business spitting anytime an American walked by. They hated us in this nation with a passion because we were the ones who made them poor. He said that France will become one of the most anti-American nations in the world. But for me, all God told me is that nearly everyone will hate America and blame her for the economic crash. Government panic. The American government will try many reactionary measures to save the economy once it starts sliding into destruction, he said. He said the U.S. government would panic and try many temporary measures, but would ultimately be unable to save America. For me, in the prophecy, Nothing But Scattering, God said that the American economy is like a massive bullet train that has been pushed and pushed and pushed. This is all the policies, right? This is all the loose economic policy, loose fiscal policy, loose banking policy that America has done. All the manipulations, moving all the regulations, what? So that money can flow freely to the greedy and then a few drops fall on the people. Well, God said that now the passenger train, it was like a bullet train. He said the train is moving so fast that it's going to completely jump off the track. And he said the engineer has no power to slow it down and is going to go smash into a hard impact. So what God told me is that the government is going to cease to care. The government is going to try by all means to cook the books and do this and do that. But once they find that they cannot do it, God said that they're actually absolutely not going to care. And on this blog, here are the things that I told you they're going to stop caring about. They're going to stop caring about providing Social Security. Social Security is going to go away. The money that they're taking from your bank account right now, the money that they're taking out of your salary right now, you're not going to get a penny of it back when you're ready to retire and you're old. So you better make another plan. And that plan is trust in the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, your mind, and lean not on your own understanding, because there's no cash coming in the future. They're going to cancel programs for mothers and children, WIC. They're going to cancel all food benefits. In New York City, we call them SNAP. Maybe in your city, it's somewhere else. They're going to completely cancel welfare of all sorts. And how will they do it? Yah says they will start to reduce the amounts. They will reduce the amount of Social Security, and they will reduce the amount of welfare. They will no longer be giving out these fat and hefty payouts. They will reduce it smaller and smaller. And then he says one day they will not have anything. And they will not even make a big fuss about it. They will just literally said, it's canceled. They will not confess and say we don't have money. They will say it's canceled. The last thing that he said is going to be canceled is medical insurance and healthcare. And I made that prophecy about 6 months ago, that there's going to be no medical aid, no HMO, no nothing. They're going to cancel it. Absolutely. No healthcare anymore. So these are just a few of the things that the man who has passed on, the man that Yah says he will vindicate, Pastor David Wilkerson said, his most famously rejected prophecy was that he saw 1,000 fires burning in New York simultaneously in what he called an earth-shattering calamity about to happen. It is going to be so frightening. We are all going to tremble, even the godliest among us. He wrote that in capital letters, and he has been trolled during his lifetime and in his death time concerning what people called alarmist, panic-inducing prophecies, an agitator, a man who missed it, a man whose prophecies failed. The title of the prophecy you have been listening to is the word vindicated. I know that the Lord has used that word with me many times, telling me that I will live to see all the messages that I have given to you, America, and you, foreign nations, fulfilled. You will live to see your prophecies fulfilled, Celestial. This is what God has said to me, and that is its own vindication. The prophecies are dated November the 7th, November the 1st, and the main one, Vindication, October 18, 2024. I am Celestial, and this is the Master's Voice. Thank you for being with me. I would ask you to please stop interacting with scammers. A scammer is anyone who is contacting you. I do not contact people in their DMs. I do not come underneath your comments and tell you that I've had a dream about you, because how would I have a dream about you without knowing you? I'm not coming under your comment to tell you to ask you to donate money to an orphanage in Africa anywhere. I'm not coming under your comment to tell you that I see an evil woman attacking you. They have a script that they use on the gullible. And it is sad to see people interacting with these people. You give them your PayPal information, you're sending them money. I'm not asking you for anything but the investment of your time to listen to the Lord's messages and to be receptive to them so that you can be recognized by Him as one who is separate from those who are not receptive to them. So please stop interacting with scammers. It doesn't matter if they're using my logo. I'm not interacting with people on that level to ask you to send anything or do anything. So please stop doing that. If you're on my Facebook page, make sure that you follow, because Facebook is always unsubscribing people. If you're here on YouTube and you got unsubscribed, just go back to the page and click the button to subscribe and then click the bell again so that you're fully subscribed. If you're someone who moved away because of the Great Purge, all the better. Dead wood has to be cut off so the plant can actually grow back stronger. And until I see you again, God bless you and goodbye. Thank you.